Hello there. Welcome to Just the Dis. My name is Brian. We talk about Blu-rays here. And for this episode, I am talking about some Blu-rays from Imprint Films out of Australia, part of the Via Vision Entertainment Group. And I'm focusing on 4 of their releases and then sort of a 5th bonus that doesn't tie into this theme. But the 4 I'm talking about, I believe, are from their June package, and all of them sort of have to do with ships in one way or another. And so I thought it'd be fun to just have this group of ship-related films to talk about in one chunk. Now, I should say at the top, I don't always do this, and I always mean to. Imprint Films Blu-rays are, as far as my experience, almost always region-free. So you can import them from Imprint Films themselves, from Via Vision's website. You can get them from Amazon here in the United States. You can get them from Import CDs. You can often get them from Diabolic DVD. Orbit DVD, I think, also carries them. So know that there are options, as importing them direct from the folks at Imprint can sometimes be a little cost prohibitive for some folks in the United States, and I've seen some talk of that, and I totally understand it. So I wanted to make it clear these are region-free and available in lots of different places. But let's get into this ship-based stuff. Let's start with 1958's A Night to Remember, based with Kenneth More, as you can see, starring there. This is a British film directed by the great Roy Ward Baker, who did a whole bunch of films, including a couple Hammer films, more than a couple actually. 2 of my favorites being Asylum, and one of my very, very favorites is Quatermass in the Pit, which he did after this movie. But so this is, of course, as you can see, the story of the Titanic and the sinking of the Titanic, and it is something like the 4th feature film made since the 1912 sinking of the Titanic disaster, and there are even more films than that. There are some shorter films that were made, and some of this is covered in the Kim Newman interview on here, but there was even a film made like shortly after this disaster happened, involving one of the actual female survivors of the ship sinking. But these were shorter films. There's like 2 German films, including a 1943 German film called Titanic, as well as a 1953 American film also called Titanic, starring Clifton Webb and Barbara Stanwyck, among others. And then this 1958 version, which is one of the best Titanic story versions in my mind. And as Kim Newman says in his interview, James Cameron certainly takes some things. He owes something to this film, because he definitely takes some of the points, little bits that this film does, and incorporates them into his film. You know, whether that's partially because they're based on truths, or if they're fabrications that are sort of brought into the story by the screenwriter of this film. Some do find their way into the 1997 version of Titanic that a lot of people know. There's also a 1979 version called SOS Titanic with David Jansen, Cloris Leachman, Ian Holm, Helen Mirren, and many more. But yeah, I think most people know the 1997 film, and not as many know this one, and that's too bad. I think this is a great black and white film, and it's really well made. I think it's just well put together. And again, the cast includes Kenneth More, Kenneth Griffith, Anthony Bushell, Honor Blackman, and others. It's been a little bit since I've seen the James Cameron version, so I cannot remember how much emphasis it puts on the other ships in the area of Titanic, and one in particular that this story focuses on a little bit more. That, you know, maybe in the 1997 version, I don't remember, but it's the ship called the SS Californian, which was the closest ship, this is historically true, to the sinking of the Titanic, or to the Titanic when it hit the iceberg and started to sink. And there's a whole little plot line in this movie that deals with the wireless radio operator of the Californian reaching out to the wireless radio operator of the Titanic and telling them, we are hitting some serious ice stuff here. We're going to stop down for the night, and trying to send their position, only to be told by the wireless operator of the Titanic, like, keep out or shut up, because, and in this film's depiction, they show that the wireless operator for the Titanic is furiously trying to wire ahead a whole bunch of arrangements for the passengers, and thus can't be bothered with this message from the Californian, which is the closest ship. So historically, after that incident, after they are waved off by the Titanic's wireless operator, the wireless operator for the Californian calls it a night, goes to sleep because the ship is, as I said, stopped down for ice, and turns off the radio just around the time that the Titanic hits the iceberg and starts calling out for help. And so it's a rather tragic story. But what's fascinating to me is that, that's a big part of this movie, is like, why can't that ship see us? The whole thing. And it's a great portrayal of an ensemble of people in, the upper class and the crew and the people in steerage, the lower class folks on the ship, giving a good sense of all of them throughout the whole story. And I kind of really like that, the way that it does that. But anyway, the Californian is something they touch on, and it sent me down this like rabbit hole of research, and I came upon this, I think it's like a research paper where somebody is sort of trying to make a case that the Californian, which, historically did not respond at all because they didn't get the radio messages and they saw the flares apparently too late or didn't know what to make of the flares. The captain of the Californian has sort of been vilified in history because he didn't do anything. And I'm not sure if that was a thing where, in the movie, they don't portray it as a thing where he even really had a choice. He heard about the flares and he's just like, I wonder what that is. Maybe they're trying to signal another ship. We don't know. But they end up not doing anything. And of course, everybody says that if the Californian had responded, they could have saved so many lives. And this paper really makes an interesting case for how it wouldn't have helped that much. And he goes into like very specific detail about how far away the Californian was. Supposedly it was anywhere from 5 to 8 miles, as far away as 21 miles, depending on whose testimony or, what can be determined. And he, goes into like the top speed of the ship, which was like 11 or 12 knots, and how it would have taken them a long time to get there, even that close. And then they would have had to slow down, and they would have had to, avoid the lifeboats that were already out and get their lifeboats out. And they were understaffed in terms of being able to deal with the amount of people that were in the water, which was, listed as 1,500 people. I don't know that 1,500 people actually made it into the water or not, but the idea that if the Californian had been there, it could have saved some lives. And that's a valid point. But his case is really interesting because he just talks about how it would have been so much more difficult than that, getting lifeboats into water filled with panicked people and all this stuff. And anyway, it just sent me down this wild rabbit hole, and I just thought that was a really fun thing that a movie can do sometime, is send you down there. But I do think this is one of the great dramatizations of the whole tragic affair, and one of the great earlier examples of a disaster movie. There are examples earlier than this. I want to say there's a movie called like Hurricane. I can't remember if John Ford directed it or who directed it, but it's from the like 30s. There's disaster movies going way back. So this is by no means the first of this type, but I love disaster movies, and so this being one of the great true life disasters, and this being one of the great depictions of that, stands as one of the great disaster films ever made, from my mind. And it's really well done and really well paced in terms of when the iceberg hits the water and all the disparate characters and the other boats and all this stuff. It's just really well put together by Roy Ward Baker, and I forgot how good it is. I hadn't seen it in quite a while, and the film interestingly depicts the sinking in a slightly different way than James Cameron's film, and apparently this was not until, I guess, 1985, when the wreckage of the Titanic was discovered, that they realized the ship actually split in half. So as it's depicted in this film, the boat sinks, as you can see here, in the Titanic, 1997 version, we see the back of the boat snap, and this part falls back onto the water and hitting the survivors that are trying to swim away from the boat. In this version, it just goes straight down like that. It just sinks straight down. So that's just apparently just something that wasn't known at the time this film came out. So that was interesting, though, because I was watching it. I was like, is the boat going to snap in half? I don't see that happening, and it doesn't. So nonetheless, this is based on a book from a guy who did some real-life interviews with some survivors and got real-life accounts to construct this narrative. And it doesn't really do much in terms of fictional characters. It does obviously have quite a few characters that are not based on real people, I guess, but there's a lot of people that are based on real people that are doing some of the things that they did based on the interviews and such. And so I just think it's a really well put together film. This, of course, has been issued already by Criterion in another Blu-ray that I'll go through in just a second and compare the features. But this one has high definition restoration by ITV Studios. I'm just going to look at the Criterion. It just says new digital restoration. So I'm not sure. I haven't done a contrast or compare, but this looks very nice. It's a black and white film. The transfer looks very good. This has a lot of new features here. It has an audio commentary by film historian Bruce Hallenbeck. That's brand new. The Making of Titanic, A Night to Remember. The Making of A Night to Remember documentary. Now that is included on this disc as well. But other than that, everything else here is new. A Shoot to Remember interview with camera assistant Mike Fox is brand new. Film historian Joe Botting on A Night to Remember. Film critic Matthew Sweet on A Night to Remember. And, of course, film critic Kim Newman on A Night to Remember. And for me, Kim Newman is my guy. So if I see a Kim Newman feature on a Blu-ray, that's the first one I'm going to go to. And so he does a great job of sort of contextualizing the other films about the disaster itself, and then the other films about it. He goes through the whole list, and he talks about the specifics. He talks about that difference of the ship being split in half, and he just does a great job. I will continue to salute and admire Imprint Films' use of Kim Newman on multiple discs I'm going to talk about here, and just in general, because he's one of my favorite film historians that can be used on these discs. So anyway, that is the disc itself. Here is the cover, inside artwork, etc. So that is A Night to Remember. As I said, that did come out from Criterion. Now, this Criterion Blu-ray I haven't even opened yet. I think I watched it back when it came out on DVD. It was one of the early DVD releases for Criterion, if I recall, and I may have watched it then. But as I said, this has the documentary. It has a commentary by Don Lynch and Ken Marshall. So the documentary is a 60-minute documentary, rare behind-the-scenes footage, archival interview with Titanic survivor Eva Hart, In Not a Minus, 1962, a half-hour Swedish documentary featuring interviews with Titanic survivors, and The Iceberg That Sank Titanic 2006, a 50-minute BBC documentary. So a lot of extra features that aren't included on this disc, but the two complement each other in a way. So I'm not going to be getting rid of my Criterion, but I by no means, I'm going to keep both because I think they're both really great. And this is just a fascinating story that I'm totally intrigued by again now watching this movie. So really good stuff from Imprint Films. Next up, we have a movie that is known by a few different titles, one of which is Damn the Defiant. I think it's also known as HFS Defiant. And this one is another British film. Stars Alec Guinness, Dirk Bogarde, Anthony Quayle. And directed by Lewis Gilbert, who would do a bunch of stuff in the 50s, including some stuff like Sink the Bismarck, wartime stuff. And he would go on to do things like Alfie in 1966 with Michael Caine, which has a lovely Imprint double disc set, by the way. And later some James Bond films like You Only Live Twice, The Spy Who Loved Me, and Moonraker. But this is before that. This is in 1962. And this film is kind of like his version of the Caine Mutiny, but it's a mutiny in a different sort of way. In this case, Alec Guinness plays a sympathetic captain of a ship during the French Revolutionary Wars. And Dirk Bogarde is assigned as his new first lieutenant. And Dirk Bogarde, in this case, is the sadistic and mean-spirited like disciplinarian type. And early on, we see Alec Guinness's character bring his young son on board the ship as a midshipman, and you just know that's not going to go well in the great scheme of things. So the movie opens with Dirk Bogarde and some other men forcibly pressing looks like lower-class folks from taverns on the shores into naval service, which apparently they were okay to do at the time if you were of a certain age and not, I don't know, gainfully occupied. They don't explain the pressing into service thing as much, but so we got a bunch of younger people and just men that have been forced into this servitude, and there's very poor conditions in terms of the way that the crews are treated on the ships, and that becomes part of the driving force behind the narrative, in that you have a group of folks, sailors on this ship, that are putting together a petition for better conditions, and they're going to do it across the entire British fleet. They are in communication with other ships and other crews, and they are trying to put together this whole mutiny is the word, but really it's much more of a bigger strike kind of thing with all the ships being involved, and so thus it wouldn't be punishable in the same way as a normal mutiny because all the ships are involved, and you can't, punish the entire Navy. I don't know exactly how the logic works here, but so that's what's going on. But the thing that's troubling and tricky is that Dirk Bogarde is really pushing these men hard, and they're getting near to the point of their own personal mutiny before things can come to a head with the actual negotiations of the greater, revolution or whatever you want to call it with the other sailors. So it's a really interesting movie to watch. It's co-scripted by Nigel Neal. He's one of my favorite British screenwriters. He also did a lot of Hammer stuff that I'm a big fan of. And Dirk Bogarde is pretty good as this first lieutenant who's really sadistic, and he has this need to... There's apparently this tradition of public punishment on British ships, and there's a moment where somebody's being punished for something they did that he assigned the punishment for. He initially assigned, and the punishment is usually lashes. It's like people getting whipped, tied to a big piece of wood and whipped on the deck while everybody watches. It's public punishment to deter other folks from doing, wrong, basically. And Dirk's original punishment is like 6 dozen lashes for whatever it was. I can't remember. It was a pretty serious offense. Like a guy raised his fist at a... No, that's a different thing. I can't remember if he struck an officer. That may be something you can be hanged for. I don't know. There's some serious business about how you deal with officers on British ships. It's bad news. So anyway, Alec Guinness is the nicer captain, and he reduces it to 2 dozen lashes. And when the guy finishes, he just collapses on the deck. And there's a great moment where Dirk Bogarde is kind of smugly grinning, enjoying this punishment. It's really gross, but it's well played by Bogarde. But yeah, things get a little complicated when the captain is injured and Bogarde has to take over the ship, and kind of goes from there. It's a really interesting sea movie that I definitely enjoyed. It has some special features here. You have an audio commentary with film historians Barry Forshaw and Kim Newman, two of my favorite commentators as a duo. I think they're fantastic, and this is a great track. You have Cast Adrift, interview featurette with actors Brian Phelan, Peter Gill, and Roger Matan. That's brand new. Defiant Crew interview with production manager and Richard Goodwin, assistant editors John Crome and Norman Wanstall, standby props master John Chisholm, special effects Martin Gutteridge, also brand new. So you get some behind the scenes production stuff there, and film historian Sheldon Hall on the film itself. This is sort of standalone interview about the movie. So lots of great stuff on this disc. It looks good. Here's what the inside cover looks like. So that is Damn the Defiant. And then we have The Long Ships. This is a fascinating one, The Long Ships. Okay, so this one is more of a Viking movie, and it is directed by Jack Cardiff, who is to me, known more as a cinematographer than a director, although he did do a lot of directing as well. This one came to my attention first, I think, because Quentin Tarantino had mentioned it as, I can't remember if he said it was a favorite, but it's definitely a movie he liked, and he likes Jack Cardiff as a director, I know that, and he loves Jack Cardiff's film, Dark of the Sun, which is a great guys on a mission movie with Jim Brown and Rod Taylor that Warner Archive put out on Blu-ray several years ago, which I had the honor and distinction of being involved in moderating the commentary track on that Warner Archive Blu-ray with my Pure Cinema Pod co-host Elric Kane. We talked to Larry Karaszewski and Josh Olson for the commentary track on that one. We had a fun time with that. But that is a great movie and a great Blu-ray transfer of a great Jack Cardiff film. Now, this Long Ships, I don't think has been available on Blu-ray to this point. It's from 1964. There is a warning at the beginning of the Blu-ray about best materials, that kind of thing. But it looks pretty good to me, ultimately. There may have been some damaged sections that I missed, but the transfer looked pretty good. And I enjoyed it. Now, as I was saying, Jack Cardiff was a cinematographer, and he would do things I think he's maybe most known for his work with the Archers, with Powell and Pressburger on The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus, A Matter of Life and Death, and he also did stuff like The African Queen in the U.S., and then worked his way up in the 80s doing other stuff like Conan the Destroyer and Rambo First Blood Part 2 and even Cat's Eye. So he worked for a long time, up into the 90s, I think. But did some beautiful work with the Archers. Like if you see A Matter of Life and Death, The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus, and you aren't sort of wowed, especially by the Blu-rays or the 4K of Red Shoes, I'd be surprised. It's really beautiful looking Technicolor work and great cinematography by Jack Cardiff. So now this is a story, like I said, of the Viking sort of period, and it deals with sort of a Moorish ruler, El Mansa, played by Sidney Poitier. And he's determined to locate this massive bell made of gold, known as the Mother of Voices. And there's a Viking explorer, Rolf, who is played by Richard Widmark, who also becomes intent on finding this mythical treasure and sails with his crew from Scandinavia to Africa to track it down, and ends up sort of reluctantly working together with El Mansa, or the two of them sort of end up working together along with their men to embark on a quest to go after this prized object. But only one leader will be able to claim the bell of his own if it even exists. So it's one of those is this a real treasure or not? Now, Kim Newman puts it really well. Of course, he's in this one as well. Again, I can't get enough of Kim Newman, so I love that he's featured in this disc as well. Now, he says in his interview that this movie is like Jason and the Argonauts without the monsters, which I think is kind of right on, because it is sort of a mythical quest. It's set in a similar period. You have the long ships, the long Viking ships and stuff, and it's got some pretty crazy stuff in it, some pretty indefensible stuff that definitely doesn't play as well now. I'll leave that for you to discover for yourself. But some very interesting performances from Sidney Poitier and Richard Widmark, and of course the great Russ Tamblyn, who's really good in this and actually really pretty solid in some of the more action-oriented, sword fighting scenes in the movie. And it's got sword fights and sea battles, and it's a fun movie. It's really entertaining. I should mention before I forget that Jack Cardiff also did a movie called The Freakmaker, which was his last film in 1974 that he directed, which I remember Diabolic DVD put out on Blu-ray a while ago. I don't know if that's easy to get anymore, but just looking at my notes, I almost forgot about that. Anyway, this is a cool movie, and it's, kind of bizarre and has some really weird stuff about it, and I like it. So then it's got some features on here. You have audio commentary of film historian Philip Barry. Good stuff. Long Shoot, an interview with actress Jeannie Moody, and Long Wigs, interview with actress Julie Samuel. These are participants in the film. film critic Kim Newman on the Longships. It's about 20 minutes with him, and he goes into great detail about the Viking film traditions, talking about the Kirk Douglas and Tony Curtis movie, The Vikings, and how successful that was and how it led to more Viking films. And he talks about this film, and he goes into really good detail about it. It's a great interview with Kim Newman. And then you also have film historian Sheldon Hall on the Longships as well. So lots of extra features included here. This is what the Blu-ray looks like. And the inside. Okay. And then lastly, in terms of the ship movies, this one is a little less ship-based. It's called The Nelson Affair. And this film is also known as Bequest to the Nation from 1973. It is directed by James McClellan Jones, produced by Hal B. Wallace. As you can see, it stars Glenda Jackson and Peter Finch. And this is set before the Battle of Trafalgar. It's the story of the relationship between Admiral Lord Nelson, played by Peter Finch, and Lady Hamilton, who's played by Glenda Jackson. And they are great together. This is set during the Napoleonic Wars, and you see the ships on the front. It looks like it's going to be a ship movie, but it's really more about that romance. And that the movie's about 2 hours long, and a lot of it focuses on the romance. I think he comes off a ship at the beginning of the movie, and then we see a lot of the romance stuff throughout the first hour and a half, and then the last half hour, last 20 minutes, I think we get to the Battle of Trafalgar stuff, and he's on a ship then. But it's much more of a set-bound ship. I mean, these are all set-bound in a way, right? But, you know, it feels like they're using more stock footage to represent some of the battle stuff, and the sets just seem a little more obvious to me, and I'll be honest, took me out just a little bit more in that sense. But I do love these actors, and I do think the romance of this kind is something that I get into. So it's appealing on that level, for sure. This has also some nice features. High-def presentation from Universal. Kiss Me interview with actor Michael Jaston. Actor Dominic Gard on The Nelson Affair. Film critic Matthew Sweet, again on The Nelson Affair. Author Neil Sinyard on The Nelson Affair. And Your Slippers Really Don't Interest Me, video essay by Kat Ellinger on Glenda Jackson. Always a pleasure to have a Kat Ellinger video essay on a film like this, and she does a wonderful job. So that is The Nelson Affair. Here's what this one looks like. And then, on an unrelated note, I have another film from Imprint, and that is The Contender. Now, this came out, I want to say, a couple months ago, but I just got around to watching it now, and I found it incredibly interesting to watch in 2022. For those that don't know, this is a film directed by what's his name? Oh my goodness, losing all my mind here. Rod Lurie, of course, who did a really great film called Deterrence. Previous to this is from 2000. Deterrence is a really interesting movie with I want to say Kevin. Oh boy, always choking on everything now. Kevin Pollak as the president of the United States. He's in a diner when it's a remote diner. He gets word there's a nuclear attack or something like that, and it's a very one location set piece with the president dealing with the information he's getting and what to do about it, and it's really interesting stuff. This is also presidential and political in its way. It is, as I said, in 2000. It is about a president played by Jeff Bridges, who has just lost his vice president and is now in the process of getting a new one confirmed. And he's got a few different candidates, one of which we see at the early part of the film is played by a governor, I forget of which state, played by William Peterson, who attempts to save a drowning woman after a car crashes off a bridge near a spot where he's fishing. But he's not able to save her. And so that becomes a talking point of why he can't be vice president. in the end, Jeff Bridges' character, who's advised by Sam Elliott with no mustache in this movie, and Saul Rubinek, who's another character actor that I love, advised they come to the decision to choose this female senator played by Joan Allen as the new running mate. And this is met with much chagrin from some folks in Congress, including a congressman who heads up the confirmation committee, played by the great Gary Oldman. And so he's sort of on a mission to dig up dirt on this new vice president. Now it's interesting, 22 years after the fact, we obviously have a female vice president in the office, but at the time this seemed a bit more fictional. But it's really interesting to watch it now for that reason, for one. But there's a whole bunch of little political things in here that I'm not going to go into specifically, but they really play interestingly in 2022. And the whole movie is fascinating because what ends up happening in part, I won't give away the whole thing, but is that Gary Oldman's character has some dirt dug up on the Joan Allen character, the senator character. Some pictures were taken of her during sexual encounter in college that is quite racy, at least it seems at the time here in the film. And he wants to sort of go after her character with this incident, and she refuses to address it, and that is her thing. Like she says, if I was a man, this wouldn't matter. And so it's really interesting, the confirmation hearing stuff, the behind the scenes stuff. It really speaks to a lot of the political TV shows like The West Wing and such that have become prominent, I feel like, in the wake of this film. VIP and other things like that. It's played much more dramatically, but just the whole behind the scenes of politics at the time, I think, was a little less of a thing. And, it's been done, but it just feels like it's become to more prominence in the years following this film. Now, this is a DreamWorks film. It was, I think she was nominated in 2000 for the Academy Award, and I can't remember if she won or not, but it's really solid, and it's got a great cast. I mean, not only Gary Oldman, Joan Allen, Jeff Bridges, Christian Slater plays like an upstart congressman who's trying to get in good graces with the Gary Oldman congressman because he wants to, get a leg up. William Peterson, as I mentioned, Philip Baker Hall as Joan Allen's dad is great. Mariel Hemingway shows up. It's just a really solid group of actors and a well-written and interesting and thought-provoking script. So anyway, this one has audio commentary with Rod Lurie and Joan Allen. Deleted scenes with optional commentary with Rod Lurie. He gives great commentary. I'm a big fan of him talking about movies. The making of a political thriller, behind the scenes featurette, and an interview with actress Joan Allen. Now, I'm not sure if any of this stuff is new. I feel like a lot of it is ported over from previous DVD releases, but nonetheless, it makes for a nice package, and it looks nice on Blu-ray. And if it's gotten a release, I forget. But I was digging it. Anyway, I felt like it was just the one that surprised me. The one I put on that I was like, oh, I'll just see if this holds my interest. I don't remember it that well, and it ended up being really engaging. So anyway, that is what I've got from Imprint Films for this episode. I will have more in the future. Definitely keep an eye on what they're doing over at ViaVision's website. Look up Imprint Films, and it will take you to ViaVision's website and show you their latest packages. They have a really exciting Walter Hill package coming later this year. Very, very jazzed about that, which includes the out of print and harder to get now, The Driver, as well as Hard Times, which has had multiple releases, but I know they'll have new features for all of these. And I'm very much looking forward to this Walter Hill set. It's going to be great. And there's more stuff on the way. Lots of good stuff coming from Imprint. So definitely keep an eye on them and what they're doing. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.